All right, we're starting now. Nikki, I thought of you and of recording this little interview and talking about how to bake because I'll have to confess, I made brownies the other day and they came out disastrously. They were the worst brownies ever. I mean, literally on the verge of inedible, okay? So I thought, okay, that's not quite working. Who do I know that makes brownie beautifully? Oh, I know, Nikki. So I thought, maybe you could tell us what you do, and also maybe without giving away any secret recipe, but maybe give us a little bit of pointers on how we can bake better, brownies in particular, and maybe looking at some weird or different flavors that you can do. I know you do gluten-free as well, which is interesting for people. So, let's start off by telling, what you do. When did you start baking? When did you launch your business?
Okay, so I own and run the Short and Sweet Bakery, which specialises in brownies. We call the Short and Sweet Bakery because I'm short, I'm 5 foot, the products are sweet, and I bake, so it's exactly what it says on the tin.
I love that.
So that's how I get people to remember me. But I've baked for years. I worked for Horse and Hound for 17 years, and I used to always bake to take to clients because people tend to remember you, and you can always try and bribe them with some food. So.
Salespeople out there, here's a tip: bribe your clients.
Bribe your clients with brownies.
Yeah.
And it's something I've always wanted to do, and I always thought I'll do it when I'm sort of older and sort of heading towards retirement. I'll start my own company. But then I got made redundant from another company, and I thought now's the best time to try it. Let's see how it goes. So I launched the company in October 2018. So we've been going just over 1.5 years now. We normally do a lot of events. We normally do 3 events every weekend: Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and we do stuff online. We sell everything online, so we use a next day courier, so you can order online and brownies will be delivered to your door. But we do brownies because they post really well. They'll last. There's so much naughty stuff in there. They'll last at least 2 weeks, and you can freeze them. So they can be sent to somebody who's living on their own, and they can freeze 5 of them and have 1 a week.
Oh, I didn't realise you can freeze them. Yeah.
Yeah, they freeze perfectly. So it can be the treat that keeps on giving for up to 6 weeks, 12 weeks if you halve them. So it's just something that's really robust, and who doesn't like a brownie as well?
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely, I agree. So tell us, how do you actually make your brownies so good? They are really, I tried them, so I know they're really good.
The secret to brownies is they carry on cooking when you take them out of the oven. So most people take them out when they're completely ready, and as they cool down, the latent heat carries on cooking them. So the idea is when they're still, they always say when it's still wobbly in the middle, solid around the edge, but still wobbly in the middle, take them out, or just turn the oven off and let them cool in the oven, let them cool completely. And as they carry on cooling, they'll carry on cooking, and then you'll have that perfect density. But if they're completely cooked when you turn the heat off, then they'll carry on cooking and they'll be dry or crumbly. The other thing is
that would explain my disaster.
So you think, oh, they're perfect, and then as they carry on cooking for another 1.5 hours while they cool, and they just get a bit too dry. And I don't use cocoa powder in any of mine. I only use Belgian chocolate. A lot of recipes do use cocoa powder, but I found cocoa powder quite drying on the palate. So if you can substitute in some chocolate for cocoa powder, then I would do that. But that's why I don't use oil as well, apart from in my vegan brownies. I only use butter and Belgian chocolate.
Oh, cool.
So I think, and eggs and sugar and flour, but that's the only things that go into my brownies. There's only 5
in terms of the chocolate, do you use what chocolate do you use? So
I use Belgian chocolate. I used to use, when I used to just do it for fun, I mean, I'd buy big 10-kilo bags of chocolate now. But Lidl's or Aldi, their basic chocolate range, which is 35p a bar for 100 grams, is perfect for cooking.
Oh, cool.
So their dark chocolate is great, and their milk chocolate is fantastic. Yeah. So their milk chocolate has 33% cocoa, and their dark chocolate has 50% cocoa. Yeah. And I cook currently with a 77% chocolate and a 33% chocolate, but I mix it together so you get rich, but you get sweet as well. So, but their 50% dark chocolate is perfect. If you need to cook with dark chocolate, just go for that. It's so cheap. I used to buy 10s and bars in the 10s, but yeah, if you can get Lidl, Aldi, or even Tesco's basics or
The cooking range.
Yeah, don't
Cool.
go to the cooking aisle because they just jack the price up. So, and it's exactly the same chocolate that they're using in the sweetie aisle. So,
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And occasionally if you do want to splash out, again, Lidl's and Aldi do amazing 70% chocolate.
Yeah.
So if you want to do something like a chocolate torte, or you're doing a ganache and you want a good quality 70% chocolate, it's just as good as green and blacks or any of those sort of makes, but they're half the price.
Price, yeah, absolutely. And in terms of when obviously 70% chocolate is great, but it is quite bitter. Do you adjust the sugar to compensate, or?
So I never use 70% chocolate on its own. I do a 60-40 mix. So 60% of it is 70% chocolate and 40% is 33% chocolate.
Okay.
So you get that strength but then the sweet chocolate, the 33% sweetens it up a bit. But I never adjust the sugar. There is a lot of sugar in brownies, unfortunately. And I use demerara because it gives a nice crunch and a nice toffee flavour as well.
Okay, so that's interesting as well. And in terms of flour, any old flour will do?
Yeah, self-raising. I use self-raising flour in all of mine. In blondies, I will add a little bit of extra baking powder just because white chocolate doesn't allow everything to rise very well.
Yeah.
Or in vegan brownies, I use bicarbonate of soda and cream of tartar because baking powder has gluten in it. So if you're gluten-free, you don't use baking powder because they will.
I didn't realize that. That's interesting. All right, so let's talk actually about the special range. So gluten-free and vegan. How, what do you do in terms of flour? Because one thing that I find, I've very rarely, because we don't have any problem with gluten, but I have occasionally done gluten-free stuff, and sometimes the flour really isn't that great. So
yeah. I use Dove's gluten-free flour. It's called Free From, and free spelt with 3 E's. And they do a self-raising flour and a plain flour, and they are absolutely amazing. You use them just as you would in any other recipe, but what you need to do is, if it requires 3 eggs, I always add an extra egg because gluten-free, just the nature of the flour, that it dries out quite quickly. So I always add extra liquid. So either add a couple of tablespoons of milk or an extra egg to the mixture. So just to add that extra bit of liquid. So when you're cooking it, you think, oh, it's very liquidy, but it will retain its moisture for more than a day.
Well, that's good.
So
and
that's
vegan. How do you replace eggs?
So I use chia seeds in my brownies. So you can soak chia seeds in water and they go gelatinous, and it works to help hold the brownies together. But you can also use chickpea water.
Oh, right, yes, some people do.
Yeah. So, but I find, chia seeds, a lot of vegans have chia seeds naturally, so it adds a little bit of texture as well, because they're a little bit
good for you, so at least you can say that you're
exactly. And I use gluten-free. Again, I use dairy-free chocolate, not cocoa powder, in my vegan brownies. And I use the Dove's free, and I also use coconut sugar, so there's less refined sugar as well. Coconut sugar is really good to cook with as well if you want to try and step away from refined sugar.
So what's the advantage of coconut sugar? I'm not entirely sure. I've heard of it, but I'm not entirely sure what's the difference with the regular sugar.
It's just a derivative of the coconuts. So it's just how they process it, and it gives sort of a golden brown sugar that you can use exactly like you would with soft brown sugar or demerara.
Oh, cool.
So again, if you're just trying to step away from so much processed sugar, or maybe if you're diabetic as well, and you don't want to use something like xylitol, then you can use coconut sugar.
Oh, all right. I didn't realize that. Okay. And I know that you add some, other flavors occasionally. You make sort of funky brownies. So how do you do that? What's the process of, inventing a new flavor, and what do you think people like the most?
Well, I've got a chocolate orange brownie, which we use orange oil in it, and we have a mint brownie that we use peppermint oil in as well as a flavour. But we also add sweets in, so we do an Oreo brownie where you get a whole Oreo in the brownie and then Oreos broken up on the top. And we just use
anything more decadent than that.
So each slice you've got a whole you cut it and you see the Oreo inside it, and then lots of crunchy bits of Oreo on top, so that's really nice. That warmed up with a scoop of ice cream is amazing because they go like a goo pudding.
Yeah.
So really, really yummy. But yeah, so you can add any sweet to it. So you can either put them in the middle, or you can sprinkle them on the top, and then bake them in. So we do brownies with Twix, Snickers, Maltesers, Dime Bar, Oreos, cream egg. My Easter ones are cream egg, so you get half a cream egg in each brownie. So they're really sweet.
Yes, that would be a bit too much for me, I think.
But yeah, so you can put anything you fancy in it. And as I said, you can either do a small thin layer, sprinkle your sweets in, and then another layer on top, or you can just sprinkle them on top and they tend to sink down into the brownie.
Yeah.
So you can just be as adventurous as you want. I've made Jack Daniel's brownies, I've made Bounty brownies, I've made cookie brownies with a sort of a cookie dough base on the top. That was really sweet.
Oh,
But that somebody requested. So, but you could put jelly tots in, Smarties. You know, you choose your favourite sweet and stick it in there, really.
yeah. Oh, that's very cool. And I quite like the idea, because for me, you know, there's a limit to how much sweetness I can take. I quite like the idea of the orange one. And you said you use orange oil. Is that essential oil, or is it one of those carrier oil mixed with essential oils, like orange extract? Or
Yeah, it's an orange oil extract that I use. So
yeah.
and a peppermint oil extract. So, and then the peppermint ones have after eights in it as well.
Oh.
So you get that fondant middly bit, and the chocolate orange one has a piece of Terry's chocolate orange on the top of each one as well.
Oh, nice.
So you get that extra crunch and the extra textures.
Well, I think I've got now a better idea on how at least not make disastrous brownie like I did before.
Definitely, when it basically shake the tin, and if it's still wobbly in the middle, take it out, or just turn the oven off and let it
And in
cool.
terms of obviously cooking times, sorry, that's my other question, just to, you know, achieve that wobbliness, as you say, you know, obviously, you know, most of us will work off recipes that we find online. We don't devise them like you do. So how do you adjust? Because obviously oven temperatures vary a lot. So do you suggest we check a little bit earlier, or?
Yeah, I mean, always give it at least 20 minutes without opening the oven. And let it, and then if you haven't got a fan oven, you need to spin it round. If you're using gas, for example, turn it round after 20 minutes. But sometimes it's just trial and error with what your oven, you know, your oven may say it's on 230, but actually if you put a temperature in there, it's a little bit higher or a little bit lower. So you get to know sort of your oven. But I always say, try not to open it for the first 15-20 minutes and then have a little look. Obviously, if it smells really hot, don't leave it in there for 20 minutes. It will be burning. But yeah, so, and always use a timer. I mean, I use my Alexa all the time because it has multiple timers on it.
Oh, cool.
So, and it will just shout at you. Whereas sometimes a kitchen timer, you just don't hear it if you're in another room. So.
Yeah. And actually that puts me in mind of another question for you. In terms of oven temperature, do we go for, you know, higher or lower for longer? What have you found that works best for brownies?
I find slightly lower and a bit longer.
A bit longer, that's better, to keep that gooiness in the middle.
Because what happens is it will burn on top, and then it'll just carry on burning, browning and getting tougher and tougher on the top, and you want that fudgy middle bit. So yeah, a little bit lower and a little bit slower. So I always do mine probably 5 minutes longer than it actually says, because I've dropped the heat a little bit.
Oh, that's.
I mean, I'm making sort of 100 brownies at a time when I'm baking.
What oven do you have? How big is it?
Double oven. But I just have 6 trays that get on the go at once. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Listen, any other secrets, Nikki, that we need to know about? And
when you're working with flour, don't overbeat it, because the gluten will break down and your cakes won't rise as much. So whenever you're adding flour, just especially with cakes, it always says fold it, 1 so you don't lose the air, but 2 so you don't overwork the gluten, which is why when you're making bread you want the gluten to be reactive, and that's why you knock it back and you knead it. But yeah, just don't over mix stuff with when you're using flour.
Brilliant. Anything else that you feel we need to know?
Just experiment. People think they should be able to bake straight away, but I think it's a skill that you have to learn, like drawing. If I said draw that picture, you wouldn't expect to get it perfectly right the first time. And I think it's exactly the same as baking. Don't worry if it doesn't work straight away. Tweak it, play around with the temperature, the time, experiment with different types of chocolate or flour that you're using, and things like that. So just don't worry if it hasn't turned out exactly how it should do first time.
Hey, my failed experiment with brownies was actually at the beginning.
Your failed brownies would be perfect in ice cream. Cut up, chucked in some ice cream. You've got ice cream brownies.
To be fair, my family is not very discriminating. They ate it anyway, but
But if you've got brownies that are a little bit dry, tough, chop them up, chuck them into a load of ice cream, some chocolate sauce on top. You've got the perfect dessert.
Well, that's a good idea, yeah, and presumably some kind of trifle of some sort.
Yeah, or you can use it at base as a tiramisu or something like that.
Cool.
Instead of
Brilliant. Nicky, thank you so much. I will, I'm ever so grateful, and I will try again, and I'll let you know how it goes. But obviously, I'll order your brownies if I really want something nice.